Hi guys, I'm Paul McWhorter and we are here lesson number 3 on the topic of using the Arduino with Python. And the reason we want to do that is there's all types of neat things we can do with the Arduino, but a whole world of new possibilities opens up if we take the data from the Arduino and send it over to Python, because Python is just a full-featured, very powerful programming language. So we want to get that data out of the Arduino and into Python to open up all types of really neat new possibilities. Let me show you one thing that we're going to be doing today. We'll get all the way, we're kind of starting in earnest today. The first lesson was just an introduction on the concept, and the second lesson was installing the software and just a quick demo program of bringing the data over, getting the data talking between Arduino and Python. Today what we'll do is we're actually going to get you to the point that we sort of develop a little virtual world. And let me show you the output of what we're going to do today if I can. I think I am going to have to run this again. Sometimes this doesn't close exactly right and it takes a time or two to get it to run right. I have so many windows running on my computer, sometimes it takes a second to get this to go right. Okay, let's see. I think it is running now. I'll bring it over here where we can see it. Okay. And then I'm going to adjust the view a little bit. Alright, so that looks pretty good. So what I have here is a little bit of a virtual world that I have created in VPython, and then where I'm getting the data, I'm getting it from the Arduino. The Arduino has an ultrasonic sensor, and it's measuring the distance from the sensor to the target, and then it's sending that data over to VPython, and then VPython has this little virtual world. And so as I come over here and move the target, it moves in the virtual world. Okay, and then also what you see, not only does this slide to give you sort of a qualitative indication, it also has this way up here that quantitatively shows you the measurement. And so sometimes you want that. You want a qualitative for sort of a feel for what the data is doing, but then you want the actual data. And so you can see that. So as I move this back and forth, the target moves and the number adjusts to precisely what wherever I am down here. So that's what we're going to do today. And this builds on a lot of the stuff that went in earlier lessons. And so first of all, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but we're going to demo this using the ultrasonic sensor. And this is a schematic of how to hook that up. Basically you've got 4 pins. You've got the VCC, you've got the ground. The trigger pin I have hooked to 13, and the echo pin I have hooked to pin 11. And so this will get you up and going with the sensor. And the sensor is the HC-SR04 ultrasonic sensor. It's a very common one. If you want more background on it, you can do Arduino lessons 17, 18, and 20. Also, just go to toptechboy.com and you can see these. We're on Python with Arduino lesson 3 example using ultrasonic sensor, and you can get the code for this project there. Okay, so that's how you hook it up. Also, we need code in the Arduino to make that ultrasonic sensor work. And I've got that code here. Okay, and you can just come in, and I'm not going to go through this. Line by line because I've talked about this a lot in the earlier lessons. But you can come up here and just say copy, like that, and then you can come over to your Arduino window and you can paste there, and then you can download the code. Okay, and so what we're doing here is we got code that makes that little ultrasonic sensor measure a distance to the target. And then, like I said, there were 3 lessons where we learned how to do this earlier. So I am not going to go through the code, but I did download it, and let's just read it here on the serial monitor to make sure that it's working. Yeah, so you see it's sitting there sending distances to the serial port. Okay, and it's that part's working. Remember, if you're going to be sending this data to Python, you can't be looking at it in your serial monitor on the Arduino and reading it into Python. So it's okay if I do this when Python isn't running, but before I run Python, I need to kill that window. Okay, so we're down here, have this circuit hooked up and making measurements. Now what we need to do is we need to come over to Python and we need to read that data in. And so I'm going to open up a new Python window, and now I'm going to kind of start going through step by step, because this is stuff that we haven't done a lot with Python. Remember that in Arduino Python lesson number 1, we learned how to install the software. If you don't have the Python software in these libraries, go back to lesson 1 and look at it or watch it. Lesson number 2, I sort of went through how to bring the data over, but I'm going to go ahead and kind of start with a blank screen this time. So the first thing we need is we're going to be reading data over the serial port. So in Python, we need to import the serial library. So we just say import, and the library is serial. And then our comments are after a # with Python. So we say import the serial library. Okay. Also, to have this virtual world, we're going to be using VPython, the VPython library. So we're going to need to import that. And the way we do that is we can say from, the name of the library is visual, import star, shift 8. That tells it to import all the VPython library. Okay, so we got the 2 libraries we need. All right, now we want to read data. We want Python to read data that's coming from the Arduino. So we have to create an object. We have to create an object that we read from, an object that we're going to attach to that serial port. And so what I'm going to name it, I can name it anything I want, but I'm going to name it Arduino serial data because that is kind of describes what it is. We're getting the Arduino data off the serial port. Creating the object, we do that as you learned last time with serial, because that's the name of the library, .serial, because that's the name of what we are creating. And now I got to tell it, where is Arduino talking? Where is Arduino talking? I come back to Arduino and I look, and the port it's talking on is port 11. So for Windows, you would say COM11. If you're on Apple, you've got to figure out however you designate a specific serial port, you do it here. And then you got to tell it the baud rate. Okay, well, let's go back and look at the Arduino program. We set the baud rate on our Arduino program to 9600. So we need to do the same thing here. When you're talking and listening, you have to be doing it at the same speed. So what we're going to do is create a serial object, or create an object to read serial port. Okay, so now we've done that, and so now remember that we've got to create a loop, because if we remember that Arduino is just sitting and printing, sending that data over the serial port, we've got to create a loop that'll just keep reading it, and we kind of want to loop forever. So a way that we can do that is a while loop, and while something that's always true, well, like while 1 equals 1. Well, 1's always equal 1, and so this will loop forever. Then remember that the while loop ends in a colon, and then we specify what's inside the while loop by indenting. Okay, so our clause starts here, and as long as we are indenting at that level, we will be in this while loop, but the white spaces matter. It needs to be exactly in the same amount of indent for that entire while loop. Okay, now what we want to do in this while loop is, the first thing, we want to go out and look and see if there's any data on the serial port, because if Arduino hasn't put anything there yet, we don't want to read. We only want to read if there's data, if there's data waiting. So how do we do that? We do an if statement. And we look at that object we created, which was Arduino serial data. We created that object up here, and then we say in waiting, okay, is greater than 0. And then I forgot, I need to put the open close parentheses. So what this is saying is, if there's data, then do these steps down here. If there's not, you'll drop out of the if statement. Okay, but if Arduino serial data dot in waiting is greater than 0, that means there's data there. If it's equal to 0, then there's no data there, and you don't want to read, because you don't want to read if there's no data there. Okay, so then what do? We read it. I'm going to call it my data. We read it into a variable, and we do that with Arduino serial data dot read line. Okay, and then let's think about what this does. All right, this is the variable my data. Could have called it anything. Remember, we don't have to declare variables in Python. We just make them up as we go along. So I made up a variable called my data, and it goes out and does an Arduino serial data. It goes to that object, which is our serial port. What does it do? It reads a line. You guys got to know, read line reads the data as a string. And so even though that string is a number, it doesn't treat it as a number. It treats it as a string of characters, 2.34. So before we use it, we're going to need to change it into a float. Okay. I better put some comments here. This is loop forever, and then here, what are we doing? Check to see if data is on serial port. Okay, and our serial port is Arduino serial data by looking at in waiting. And then here, what do? If data is there, then read it. Okay. Now, what does it do? It reads it as a string. Well, in this project, we don't want to just have it as a string. We want it to be a number. So we have to convert that string, let's say it's 2.34, into the number 2.34. And so we need a new variable. We'll call it distance. Could have called it anything. And we're going to float my data. Okay. So what this is going to do is it's going to convert the string, which might be 2.34, using float. It's going to convert it into a floating point number or a real number, and it's going to put it in the variable distance. So convert string my data to floating point number and hold in distance variable. Okay, does that make sense? I hope it does. Now let's just see if we're getting the data in. Before I do a lot, I want to just run this thing. So let's say print distance. Okay, so I'm going to run this and see if I'm still getting the data in here. Okay, look at that. So I've got the data coming in. Understand, this is the Python shell here. So this is printing out in Python. So we threw that data stream to it in Arduino, and Python's catching it and printing it out here. And look, you see it's just updating in real time as I move this. Very good, very good. So we are getting our data over. That's an important point. What we want to do now is we want to kind of start creating that virtual world. And we've already imported our VPython library by saying from visual import star. And so we can start doing this stuff that VPython does. And if you want to kind of learn how to use some of the commands in VPython, let's come over here and just say VPython, let's say like a tutorial. Okay, and this second one is pretty good. Simple 3D programming using VPython. That's pretty good. You can come to introduction, and it'll show you different things you can do. This is a tutorial. I'm trying to think of a good place. One of the things we're going to be doing is creating a cylinder. So you can just sort of kind of look here and see the commands, see the things that you would want to create. So if I want to create a cylinder, I would do it with a command like this, and then the page kind of shows you all the parameters that you can use. And so vpython.org/contents/docs/cylinder, or if you wanted to make a box or a curve or whatever, but we're going to be making a cylinder, and so this is kind of a good little tutorial there on how to make a cylinder. Okay, so the way this works is to kind of create these little virtual worlds. The first thing is before you go into your while loop, you want to create the object. And when you create that object, you want to like give it dimensions and a position and color and sort of give it the parameters that tells VPython how to draw that object. All right. Now here's the cool part. Once you get down in the loop, you can start updating or dynamically changing one of the parameters, and as you change that parameter, the visual will change. Okay. So let's start by creating a cylinder, and I want that cylinder to be a little rod, and I want the distance or the length of the rod to change as the distance between the target and the sensor changes. So the first thing I need to do is, before I start looping, I need to create that object. Well, what do I want to call the object? Well, I'm going to call it measuring rod because it's kind of showing me the measure. And then what type of object is it? It's a cylinder. Okay. And now, what things do we need to say on here? Well, I guess that I could say what radius or how long do I want it to be? The length. Okay. The length I'm going to have is 6 inches because I sort of want to go from 0 to 6 on my scale. So I'm going to make the length. I have trouble spelling length. I will tell you, I have trouble spelling length. L-E-N-G-T-H. Okay. Length is equal to 6. Okay, because that is how long I want it to be. What color do I want it? Well, color is equal to color.yellow. And there's kind of a limited number that you can do. I think red, green, blue, cyan, magenta, yellow you can do this way. Otherwise you've got to do it a little more complicated, but we'll just do the simple things for now. Okay. How big of a radius do I want it? Well, if it's 6 inches, kind of not quite as fat as the ruler, how about a 1/2 inch for the radius? Okay. Radius is equal to 0.5. Okay. And now I think I need to tell it the position. All right. And what I want is, I don't want to, the position is measured from the end of the cylinder. And so I don't want the end of the cylinder in the center of the view, because then I would have a bunch of black space over here. I want to sort of fill up the view. And so if it's 6 inches, I sort of want to put the starting point at x equal -3, and then I would sort of go from -3 to 3. I would be filling up my viewing window. And so for my position where I'm putting this thing, in x I want it to be -3, and then in the middle on y, x is this way, y is up and down, and then z is into the page. And so I'm scooting it over by -3. And then I kind of want it in the center this way, so I would leave that at 0, and then up and down 0 is fine too, so I'll leave it like that. So now I've created a cylinder that'll show up. Okay. What I want to do is, as we are getting new distance measurements, I want to change the length, and I want to make the length of it equal to how far I am from the target. So if I'm 1 inch away, I want that cylinder to be 1. If I'm 5 inches away, I want it to be 5. And so the length of that cylinder will match the distance. And the thing is, I don't have to create a new measuring rod. What are you thinking? Measuring rod. Okay. I don't have to create a new object. I just change the parameter of the object I have. And I do it this way: measuring rod dot, what am I changing? Length. You say measuring rod dot length will change this, and it's down here in the for loop, so it'll change it every time through. And what do I want to make it? I want to make it distance, because that's a number. Distance is the floating point number that we converted the my data into. My data is a string. We convert it to a number called distance. And so I'm going to set my measuring rod dot length equal to distance. And so now every time through here, it's going to read a new distance, and then dynamically it's going to change the length of that distance. I think this is going to work. Let's try it. Oh, okay. There is a problem in my program. What did I do wrong? Well, what is wrong with that? While, you see, it told me the error is here, but look at this. Okay, here I closed this parenthesis, but I did not close that one. Okay, parentheses problem. So when I looked at this, there's nothing wrong here. Sometimes it's a line above or below that you have to look at. So let's take a look. Ooh, another problem. Okay. Radius 0.5. I see, look. this is equal, position is equal to that. Just like radius is equal to 0.5, position is equal to minus 300. I think it's going to work this time. Yes, yes. Is it going to run? I think I did not kill it good last time, so let's try it again. Okay. I know what's right. Okay. One more thing that I forgot to tell you and I forgot to do. If you are going to dynamically change a property of an object in VPython, somewhere in this loop you have to tell it how fast you want to go. You have to tell it the rate at which you want to go through this loop. Okay, and the rate I'm going to say is 20, which means try to do it 20 times a second. And that's a good starting point, but this is something that you got to play with, because you got to kind of make it match and work well with how fast you're sending the data. And so we're sending the data pretty fast, probably 20 times a second. But if it's jumpy, you probably need to play with your rate or play with the rate that you're sending the data. But I think this 20 should probably work. And so let's take a look now. Okay, look at that. So I'm going to get this out of the way. I'm going to move this over here. And what you can see is we created a rod, and now this rod is changing length as it gets the data. So you see as I come down, it goes down. As I go out, it goes out. And that length of that rod is representing the distance between my target and my sensor. And so that is just super cool. So you sort of made your first little virtual world. You made your first little virtual world by just creating a simple object. That object is measuring rod, and we set the parameters up here, and then down here dynamically as we go through this loop, every time we get a new data, we change that to a number distance, and then we make measuring rod dot length equal to that distance. And so that sits there and continues to update. And so I think that that is just pretty neat. Well, let's say what is nice about that. What I think is nice about that is that you sort of got a qualitative indication of distance, and that's really very pleasant to the mind to sort of see that qualitative, very graphic, very visual representation. But sometimes what you also need is you will also need the actual quantitative data, the number. And so how would we do that? Well, we were printing it out, but that's not very attractive to just sit and have it print. So why don't we create a new object and create a label? Okay, so up here it's the same thing. We're going to create the object up here outside of the while loop, and then down in the while loop we'll dynamically update it. So what do we want? We want a length, L-E-N-G-T-H, label. Okay, and what type of object is that? So this is the variable name. We could have called it anything. Well, it's a label. Okay, and what types of things, what types of parameters can we set for a label? Well, we got to tell it the text, and so initially the text is going to be equal to target distance is, like that. And we're not going to put any target distance because it'll only do that one time, just very briefly flash up. But we don't have a number yet, so we'll just put that label. And then what else can we do? Well, we could put the position. Okay, so position, and I closed this with the wrong thing. If I open it with one, I need to close it with one. And remember, we remember from last time, position equals. Well, I don't want it right in the middle horizontally, because then it would be on top of that rod. So I want to move it up a little bit. And remember, it's X, Y, Z, and so the second number would be the Y position. And so X at 0 would be centered left and right. And now let's just move it up just a little bit. And so on our position, like let's say we move it up an inch, that should have it out of the way of that little rod that we made. Remember, the rod is at the position 0 on Y, and so we're moving it up an inch. And it has a radius of 1/2, so that gives a little space between the top and the bottom of the text. And so I think that'll work pretty good. And then Z is into the page, and we can just put that at 0 like that. And then we're going to close this. So we've created we've created a label. Also, we need to tell it how tall we want it, how tall we want the text, and this is in pixels. Height, H-E-I-G. I have trouble spelling height and length. Okay. All right, so that is in pixels, and so let's make it about 30 pixels, and that should be a little bit taller than the rod, and so it should be something that's pretty easy to see. So that creates the object length label. Well, what is it that we want to update in here? Well, we want to put a number on that. And so what we need to do is we need to create another variable. Let's call it my label, and let's say my label is equal to target distance is, and then what I want to do is that string of text, on the end of that I want to put the string of text which represents the number, and in this case I want to print a string. And so the way you concatenate, or the way that you combine two strings in Python, is with the plus sign. And so if I say A plus B, the string A plus the string B is the string AB, or A plus B plus C is the string ABC. So I want to concatenate the string target distance is plus the string which is the number distance. And so I don't want to concatenate distance because that's a number. I have to concatenate a string. What string has the distance number in it? It's my data, what we originally read. So I'm going to make it my data. All right. So look at this. Now I have a label. Target data is, and then whatever the number is that I read. And so this is the label. Now what I have to do is I have to dynamically update this object in this loop. And so what is the object? Length label. And then what parameter do I want to update here? Not the position, not the height. I want to dynamically update the text. So TEXT is equal to what? My label. And the reason I want to do my label is because every time through my label is updated, because it's going to be adding a different string here because it's reading a different string in. Okay, I made a bunch of mistakes last time, but this time I think this is going to work. So let's run this again. Okay. Okay. Let me kill it. It just died there. Sometimes this is a little finicky. Okay, so now I can make this small. I can bring this over where you can see it. Kind of bring this down. And look at this. Target distance is 2.98. And then this changes. So now watch as I move this. Look at that. I come down to right under an inch, or I come out to right at 4.5 inches. Okay. Oops, I lost it. Let me sometimes if you get out of range, like if you do something that makes it measure 0, if you ever make the length 0, then you can't get it back. So you really need an if statement in here so that you never set it to 0. Just one of those finicky little things about VPython. And so I got to be careful not to set the length of that thing to 0. And so now let's look. I come in, it's coming in, I go out, it's going out. And look at that. In real time, this is changing. And qualitatively and quantitatively, I'm getting both the actual measured distance and I am getting a visual representation of it. And so that is just really neat. What do I not like? I don't like the white box around my label. So how can I turn that off? Up here where I create length label, where I create that label, I can put the parameter box equal false. And that should turn the box off. Okay, so let's come over here and look at this. Okay, I got no box, and I've got this thing updating in real time, quantitatively and qualitatively. That is just really, really, really neat. I like that. Okay, so also let me show you. If I right mouse click the right button, I can sort of change the view of this thing. Okay. You see how I can move it around? It's like I can change the view, and so now I've almost got it matched more like the camera view. Okay. And also, if you hold the scroll wheel down and then move the mouse in and out, you can kind of change how close or how far away you are. So that is just, I think that is just super neat how in real time now I can kind of keep this thing updated. Okay. All right, I think that's really neat. But what you can see is our virtual world only had one object, and it was sort of like a hypothetical object of the distance and then the label. I think what I would like to do is I would like to put another object. I'd like to put an object representing the target. And so I want a little rectangle, and I want that rectangle to move, or a little box, and I want that box to move as I move the target. So I'm going to create a virtual box that's about the size of my target, and then I want that box to move as my target moves. So what do I need to do? I need to create a new object up here. And so far I have the object measuring rod, and it's created up here, and it's updated every time I go through the loop. I have an object length label, and it's updated every time I go through the loop. Also, all of these things are part of the if clause, and so if you have data, you do all of these updates. If you don't, it just sits in loops until there's data. And so these things are indented to be included in the if clause, and then these two are the things that are in the kind of raw level of the while loop. Okay, so these are sort of nested. This is the stuff in the if statement, and then the if and the rate are the things in the while. And so you sort of nest your indenting to indicate where you are. All right, so now I need to create a new object, and that new object, let's call it, let's see, what do we want to call it? Let me get this over here, and we want it to kind of be a box, and so I think I will call it what it is. It's my target, okay? And so I'm going to create an object up here. Again, this is, before you get to the while loop, it's a target. And do we want the target to be a cylinder? No. Do we want it to be a sphere? No. Do we want it to be a label? No. We want it to be a box. Okay, a box would be sort of like a three-dimensional square, or a three-dimensional kind of rectangular type of thing. So what parameters do I need to give the box? Well, let's give it a color. That's kind of green, so I can say color is equal to color.green. That's how you do a color. Color is equal to color.green. That works for like red, green, blue, cyan, magenta, yellow. If you're using a different, you can use any color you want, but it's just you specify it differently if it's not one of the kind of simple colors. Okay. In the box, I need to give it a length. And this looks like it's about 0.2 inches. So I'm going to say length is 0.2. And length is that dimension along the x-axis. Okay, so length is equal to 0.2. Width, I'm going to set equal, this looks like it's about 3 inches, so I'm going to set it to 3. Okay, and remember we have got to put commas between our parameters here, which I didn't do. Okay. Width is equal to 3. And then I've got to give it a position. Okay, so the position, now this is something that you got to kind of understand. The position of a rectangular object is measured from the center of the box. Okay, the cylinder measures from the end of the cylinder. Okay, the position would be here from the end of the cylinder. For a box, it's measured relative to the center of the box. Okay, so the center of this box, you know, if we don't want, you know, basically we need to get this sort of scooted down some so that it will match up well with our rod. And so what we're going to do is, since it's 3 inches, the center point would be 1.5. So if the center point is 0, the bottom of the box would be at -1.5. Well, I want to put the bottom of the box at -2 because I don't want the top of this thing running into my text. Remember, this text is up here. Where is my text? This text is up here at 1. Okay, the text is up here at 1. and my box is 3.5, and that would be 1.5 above 0, this box is going to be running into the text, so I need to lower the box. And so on the x, I can still have it at 0 for right now, and it's the y I need to pull down a little bit, so I'm going to make this minus 0.5, okay, and that's going to put the bottom at minus 2, okay, because it's minus 0.5 plus that 1.5 length from the center. 1.5 plus a half is 2, so the bottom of the target now is at minus 2, and we need to kind of keep track of that. And sometimes you just kind of play around with this. If you're not following me, just sort of play around with it and see what the object does. But I'm actually kind of trying to think through it here at this point. So the position is at 0, minus 5, minus 0.5, and 0. Okay, and then we got to remember to close that, and I keep forgetting that this is an equal here. All right, so now if I set the position of the center to be, if the position of the center is at minus 0.5, the position of the bottom of the target is minus 2, I need to come up here and make this measuring rod, I need to put that at minus 2 as well on y, and so that way the target will be sitting right on top of the measuring rod there at minus 2 position for the bottom. Okay, and so I think that doing that should make it line. Okay, now the position I want this thing as I move it, I want this virtual object that I created, this virtual object called target, I want this to dynamically move. I don't want its dimensions to change, so I'm not going to change length or width or height, but what I want to change is I want to change its position. Okay, and so down here what I'm going to change is target.position, okay, and that target.position I'm going to make equal to, well, let's see, let's do this, let's do the y. The y, it's not going to be going up and down in y, it's going to be staying where it is in y, so I'm going to make that minus 0.5, okay, and then in z I don't want it moving, I want that to be 0. What I have to change is the x value, because I want this moving back and forth in x as this measuring rod changes. Okay, I want it to sort of go with the measuring rod, but with the measuring rod I'm changing the length, but then with the target I want to change the position. All right. Well, what you got to see is that the position of the measuring rod starts at minus 3, so I want the position of the target to start at minus 3 as well. So I'm going to say minus 3, but then I want to add to it whatever distance I measure. So at minus 3, that's sort of like measuring 0, and then if I measure 1, I want to go minus 3 plus 1, and that'll move it over 1 from I'm sort of setting my 0 position to minus 3, if you will. And so I think this is going to work. Let's give it a try. Ooh. Okay, what does it not like? Okay, what on earth did I do here? Look at that, I closed that parentheses in the wrong place. Okay, this parentheses is closed there. So that one closes that one closes that one. I don't know, I must have hit an enter without realizing that. Okay, still is not happy. Oh yeah, I don't indent the while loop. Okay, so now everything's back the way it was and right. So while loop is here, this indentation shows you the while clause, this indentation shows you the if clause. Let's try. Okay. Well, this is not perfect, but let's kind of look at it here. Okay, so we got some stuff here that we need to work on, because first of all you can see this is way too big now. I don't want it that big, and then I need to work on my distances a little bit. I want the bottom of this to match with the middle of that, so we need to kind of come up and look at our things. Let's see, the box did not look exactly right. Oh, okay, I did the length and the width. What I forgot to do was tell it the height is equal to 3 as well, so that's going to make the target the right size. And then also what you can see is that cylinder was too big, and so I want to make that cylinder I want to make its radius a lot smaller. And so instead of 0.5, I want to make it 0.1, so it's more like a little string along there. And then those things were not lining up in position. Those things were not lining up in position. -3. Oh, that could be because I didn't have my height set. So let's just take a look at it and see how close we are now. This looks kind of interesting here, huh? Well, I think one thing that I'm going to need to do is I think I'm going to need to change my target distance up a little bit, but we can play with that in a minute. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to right mouse click and I'm going to kind of change my view a little bit. Okay. Do you see how I'm kind of trying to get a view that looks like this? All right. Look at this now. As I move this, the target moves. As the target moves in the real world, the target moves in the virtual world. All right. I'm going to try to move this up a little bit so that it's not quite on top of this, although it kind of depends on when you change your view, it sort of changes a little bit. But I'm going to try to make that a little bit higher so it's not quite in the middle of things there. So that was the label, that was the length label. And the position, I'd sort of put it at 1. Let's see if we put it up at 3, if that gives us a little more height. Okay, and what I'm trying to do is get that label up where I have room and it's not running into the target. So let's take a look. Yeah, I think this is going to work better. Let me try running it again. Sometimes if you mess with the box while it's running and updating, it's not happy. So let's let this thing die. Sometimes it's good to kill the shell window as well, so let's try. Give it a chance to start moving before you start moving the box around. Okay, and I think that target might work once I change my view a little bit. So right mouse click, I'm going to kind of change my view. There it goes. Look at that. Is that not neat or what? I think I got this too high. I'm going to move it down a little bit. Okay, so we had it at 3. Let's put it up 2 and see how that looks. And that is the label position. Instead of being up 3, it was kind of off the screen. I'm going to have it up 2 and see how that looks. Ooh, I think I'm going to like this. So if we just sort of look from the side, you can see that we're working. Let's try to change the view. Right mouse click and kind of come down. You can see I sort of have it looking about like the view down here in the real world. And so I have a little virtual world that's giving me a graphical representation of this distance, and it's giving me a quantitative representation in this label. And so I think that is just really, really, really neat. Okay, so I've kind of taken you through. I made a little rod that changes length, and I have a target that's changing position. I want you to go in and go ahead and start building out this virtual world. And I'm not going to do every object for you because I want you to kind of think what you want to make it look like. If you're not sure what you want to make it look like, maybe go in and sort of create something that would represent this ultrasonic sensor. What would that be? Well, it would be a box that's very thin, and then you would have 2 cylinders coming out of it, and the 2 cylinders would sort of be offset in, X is this way, so it would be offset in Y negative and offset in Y positive in 2 little cylinders, and then a little box, and you could sort of build that. You could also, even if you wanted to, build the board down underneath it, or you could build something that represented the Arduino, but start building out your virtual world. Now, this ultrasonic sensor, if you built that, you would just create the object up here, but you would not update it. There would be no parameters updated in this loop because it's not moving. You would still update your target and your measuring rod, but the other things would just be sort of sitting still. And with that, you can kind of start getting comfortable with all of these parameters. So if you go to, again, vpython.org and you go to this .contents.docs, You can see all the different objects that you can create. You can create an arrow, a box, a cone, a curve, cylinder, faces, frames, all types of things that you can create, and then you just sort of set the parameters, and the instructions will kind of show you. You kind of get a knack for it. A lot of the objects are very similar. So anyway, this is Paul McWhorter. We've done our first little virtual world, and hope this has been lesson number 3. Hopefully you will tune in very shortly for lesson number 4. Take it easy, guys.